B-E-L-L.
Nice.
Meet Isaac. He is a third grader at George Washington Carver School in Cleveland. He is vivacious and has a great sense of humor, but is a bit of a troublemaker. At first glance, he would appear to be a typical rambunctious elementary school kid. You wouldn't know that he lives doubled up in a home with another family, taking care of his half-paralyzed mother with his two brothers. He is just one of the 2.5 million homeless kids in America and one of the 2,744 homeless students that live in Cleveland right now.
Cleveland has been at the forefront of addressing urban homelessness, and yet one important group has slipped through the cracks. According to the Northeast Ohio Coalition for the Homeless, 41% of the homeless population is bearing the struggle as a family, and the number is growing. Since previous homelessness is one of the largest determinants of whether or not someone will become homeless in the future, our plan focuses upon reversing the upward trend for family homelessness, which would not only alleviate homelessness now, but would further prevent vulnerable children from falling into homelessness later in life.
We divided our $35 million into 4 subcategories: services, housing, prevention, and shelter, each with funding specifically engineered to help homeless families now, but to especially aid vulnerable families on the verge of losing their homes. So how do we plan to fix this? Prevention.
While we place money into each specific subcategory, each plan is crafted with the goal of preventing homelessness in the future. We plan to put $12.5 million into services, $10 million into permanent housing, $7.5 million into the shelter system, and $5 million straight into prevention.
Half of our services funding is going towards changing rapid rehousing. Cleveland currently operates under a model called Housing First, the idea that it is best to first house individuals before addressing any root problems causing homelessness. As such, the city practices rapid rehousing. Rapid rehousing is different than permanent supportive housing in the aspect that anyone can receive rapid rehousing, not just the chronically homeless. The problem? It doesn't work. Many families are not prepared to live on their own and quickly return into the shelter or transitional housing system once their 3 to 6 month rent voucher ends. It's comparable to handing someone the keys to a sports car, telling them to watch an online driving class and saying, "Alright, I've given you these keys and instructions. You need to learn how to drive this car because in 3 to 6 months you're going to be racing in the Indy 500. Samantha Justin, Assistant Director of the Zelma George Family Shelter, explains
A
why.
lot of people were not solving the reason that they became homeless in the first place. So whether it's not being able to hold a job or maybe having a lot of mental health issues that are making them maybe not have good hygiene and the landlord gets frustrated or things like that. So once that 4 months is up, we'll see many times they'll come back.
Fix rapid rehousing by allocating a large share of our funding for services to providing mandatory aid for people receiving rental assistance under the program. The services will be given prior and during the initial phases of rapid rehousing to ensure that the families do not re-enter homelessness.
Not only will we provide a support system for individuals suffering from mental illness, substance abuse, and trauma, but the central service we will offer is life skills training. When addressing life skills, we sought to use the Canadian Observatory on Homelessness method, which has 3 categories with the goal being to teach self-efficiency without relying on constant support. The 3 categories consist of 1. Core basic skills, 2. Independent living skills, and 3. Social skills. Core basic skills is defined as, quote, numeracy, literacy, and information technology, end quote. Independent living skills are seen as, quote, managing a household, budgeting, appointment keeping, contacting services, and dealing with bills and correspondence, end quote. Social skills are, quote, interpersonal skills, avoiding or dealing with neighbor disputes, and developing self-confidence in social networks, end quote. A research study done in 2007 by professors at the University of Chicago found that life skills training does increase self-sustainment post-training. This plan is inherently preventative as we're ensuring people don't fall back into homelessness.
Funding for housing will go primarily to ensuring the upkeep of permanent supportive housing. Permanent supportive housing is a part of Housing First, a system in which homeless people are given a house before anything else. Though we believe rapid rehousing is ineffective, nationwide, this method of permanent housing has proved very effective, as it has helped decrease the number of chronically homeless individuals by 27% since 2007. Additionally, according to the National Alliance to End Homelessness, Permanent supportive housing has been shown to lower the costs associated with the use of public services, such as shelters, hospitals, jails, and prisons, as less individuals need those services once they have proper housing. In Cleveland, CNH Housing, a project first launched in 2006, has decreased homelessness by 86% through permanent supportive housing while working with over 40 partners in the area. These housing accommodations, such as the Greenbridge Commons and Emerald Alliance in Brooklyn Center, have shown only a 1 to 2% return to homelessness from their residents. It is our plan to continue to fund this housing as it has proven to be a very effective way to combat homelessness. And for this reason, we have chosen to allocate $10 million towards permanent supportive housing.
We recognize, given that we can never end homelessness altogether, we're going to need a working shelter system in Cleveland. We plan to maintain current levels of funding for the shelter system in Cleveland to ensure that someone will always have a place to lay their head at night.
But how do we prevent homelessness in the first place? We plan on taking advantage of Cleveland's unique housing court. Today in 2018, evictions are sweeping across cities nationwide. Poor renters are particularly susceptible. According to the National Law Center on Homelessness and Poverty, in a study conducted by the Apartment List, 11% of low-income individuals received an eviction threat over the span of a year. And for low-income single parents, the situation is even more dire. 30% risked missing their rental payments at one point in a 3-month period. Insofar as evictions lead to homelessness, part of our preventative measures will be establishing services to help prevent eviction. We want to establish a department or aid service within the housing court specializing in preventing eviction for families with single parents who have a household income of less than $15 an hour, the estimated income needed to sustainably rent a 2-bedroom apartment in Cleveland. The department will have 2 main capacities for prevention: short-term payments and legal aid. Functionally, the department would take calls from people that are facing eviction and help with short-term payments either for rent or utilities that could drive people into homelessness. In Denver, they used a similar model to stop 470 evictions annually. And the department would provide legal representation for the qualified families facing eviction, which helps tenants navigate complex legal situations which they now face without the help of any aid.
But just as important as legal support for the homeless is their education. Lack of education is yet another cause of homelessness across the nation. Without at least a high school degree, it is very difficult to obtain a well-paying job or even a job at all. Parents fall behind in rent and they lose their homes. For this reason, the education of our youth is extremely important as it determines the course of their future. Samantha Justin furthers that.
It's really hard to think about your future when you have nowhere to live, especially as a parent talking to your child. You're not really worried about that right now, so that they can kind of slip through the cracks. Just making sure that, behavioral issues are dealt with. Being in shelter is traumatic for a child.
We see education as critical for long-term success, and as part of our plan, we want to place some of the money allocated for prevention into organizations such as Project ACT, which is an organization that works within the Cleveland Metropolitan School District to ensure homeless children have the opportunity to go to school and stay in school while also having a place to stay.
Some kids, homelessness can overshadow life itself, getting in the way of education and their future. Our Cleveland plan aims to prevent kids and families from falling into homelessness in the first place and ensures that once they receive housing, they stay there. Our plan is dedicated to the idea that kids like Isaac should never have to worry about where they live, and the way we do that by giving families housing and preventing homelessness now and in the future.